Okay. Yes. It's 2 o'clock. I'll go ahead and call this Harbin County School District 2 work session to order. Casey Almeida will be here in a few minutes. Nick will be here momentarily. I've known you right there.
I just was texting you because I'm like, I just saw him. I don't know where he went.
I just got lost. Okay, Nick's gonna go ahead and lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so the work session basically only has 2 topics to cover. One is discussion of critical race theory, whether we should have to talk about some resolution to ban it from teaching in our curriculum. Currently, it's not being taught, but just a discussion of what we'll do. There's been some outside interest and something Joe mentioned talking about too in the work session. And the second thing is the class sizing here at Saratoga Elementary School. So I guess Dr. Copeland, if you have any comments on the first item A, opening remarks.
Should you approve the agenda? I know it's a work session.
Oh, sorry.
Doesn't matter.
We probably should.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the work session agenda as presented.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the work session agenda as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. Now,
Okay. Well, the first topic came out, I think Joe first brought it up in a board meeting back, I don't know, probably in May or June, somewhere in there. And so it was already kind of decided that the board might talk about this at the next board work session, which is this month. And then in the meantime, we had a resident, Mr. Edwards, came and presented some of his ideas about encouraging the board to consider passing a resolution. So it came out from a couple of different directions, to be honest. And so at the time, knowing that we were going to do this, I asked Mr. Manning as curriculum director, since it was kind of connected to curriculum, to put together just some information to kind of present this work session and just kind of start that discussion. In the meantime, also, Mr. Edwards sent some information to the board originally, I think around the 8th, and I don't think people got it. But then we checked it all out. Everything's working today. So there you go, technology. I'm not sure how we would ever figure out why it didn't get there on the 8th. But anyway, so there's some information coming from some different directions. So I guess at this time, if it's fine with the board, I'll just let Mr. Manning kind of go through. He's attached some of his information, and it does also have some links in it. So if you want to follow along as he goes over.
Members of the board, would you like me to approve the location? Because 4 of you were kind of not even facing. Okay, so obviously this is a very important topic, so I appreciate your time doing this. What I did was I put together this brief package that I thought would be necessary to kind of discuss the topic at hand, critical race theory, and then my findings through a number of analyses with what we have within our own district. I thought it would be best to start with hopefully a common definition of critical race theory, just to make sure we're all on the same page. I don't know if it's necessary for me to read every single definition for the sake of the people in attendance and possibly for the sake of anyone watching. That might be best. I just know that might prolong this process. If there are any recommendations.
I think this will be attached as a.
It is attached, and I believe it is public.
So it's public.
So just a brief version.
The brief version?
Yeah.
Okay. So critical race theory, I used a combination of really 5 different definitions, 4 of which I found on my own, and I tried to focus on sources of information that I would consider trustworthy, a number of which are either run through nonprofits or I would argue fairly esteemed groups of individuals. The fifth one was added from one of our board members. I don't know if it's necessary to even mention that, but they would like to include their definition for what they've done in their own research, and I obliged to that. So I have a summary of those findings, and my argument would be that every single one of those sources of information all pointed to pretty much the exact same thing, and that would be critical race theory is a methodology. We call it a historical lens to look at history from a different viewpoint. There are a lot of those, coincidentally, throughout the study of history, and hopefully you're all familiar with that. You can focus in very on a very narrow focused topic, so you can do much broad lens when you look at things. But I gave the summary is to study critical race theories, to study the idea that minority racism is ingrained in American society, that various laws, rules, expectations of our society treat a white man, a white woman, or a white child differently or unequally compared to a non-white man, non-white woman, or non-white child. In other words, these definitions are saying that racism is systemic in pretty much all parts of American society. And so I took it a little further and said, critical race theory typically includes a critical analysis of multiple areas or facets of life, including, and these are just examples, this is not an exhaustive list, but the US legal system, lawmaking, criminal justice, healthcare, the housing market, banks, schools, and so on. So the idea is that racism is very prevalent in American society. And so to study critical race theory is to look at all aspects of our society with a different lens that tries to investigate and eke out those instances where that racism is prevalent. Does that make sense? From there, I then took it a few steps further just to point out some additional information. This has been a fairly strong topic here in the state of Wyoming with our own Department of Education since, sorry, I still since really the beginning of the year. Our state superintendent, Jillian Balo, she made an official statement on critical race theory back in May of this year, where she essentially said that no, it is not taught in our schools. There was also a more recent statement that was kind of a joint communique really between a few of our senators and again Superintendent Balo that talked again that it's not present in our school systems, but that also that we were going forward, the WDE, I should say Superintendent Balo really is supporting this new bill called the Civics Transparency Act, which is designed to basically give our community members, our citizens of the state, a very clear picture of what's being taught, not only in any history classes, language arts classes, but all classes K through 12, including all possible resources that teachers can pull into the classroom. So the point of me including these two documents is just two, but to show that there have been some strong statements that have already been made within our state that the belief is that we do not have critical race theory in our teaching system. And I shouldn't say belief, I would say, I would consider it fact, since it's coming from our own leadership. But then also they're going to take it a step further to try to help the citizens of the state really feel a little bit more at ease with what's going on, what we're teaching. I then went into I linked some of this information is in the packet already, so I welcome you to please read through that. I also linked the Wyoming Content Performance Standards. I did not, in the last month or so, go through every single one, but I have done a number of analysis of these standards. In particular, I went back through the history and the ELA standards, which I think is more often where people make accusations of critical race theory being potentially present in the classroom. I went through those standards to verify. We do not have critical race theory in our standards, which I think is very important for the state of Wyoming, in which Superintendent Balo has made statements before previously. As you know, my very first year here, 5 years ago, one of the first projects I undertook was to create more transparency for the district. So I got that curriculum mapping, that documentation available on our website for individuals. So I have a link to the curriculum page that I put together, as well as a document that I felt like you put a little bit more emphasis on that, and that's a very long-winded title, District Curriculum Maps, Power Standards, Proficiency Scales, and Curriculum Programs, where it links all of our curriculum maps, it links all of our curriculum programs that we purchased and we're utilizing within the district. All this is really, what I'm trying to use this is to point out the fact that, again, it is not in our standards. It is not in our teaching, to the best of my knowledge. It's not in our teaching based on what teachers are presenting. And therefore, I do not consider it to be any sort of threat that could be in the classroom. I don't know if I need to go into this, but I don't support the use of critical race theory, in my own professional opinion, for a number of reasons. I will point out, though, that part of the reason why I wanted to include this definition of what critical race theory is in my presentation is to remind everyone that it is in our standards, in the Wyoming Content Performance Standards. Our teachers, especially our history teachers, especially our language arts teachers, are expected to cover standards that do include sensitive topics. That's the way I can put it. Where they're looking at differences between different groups of people. They're looking at differences in culture. They're looking at historical conflicts. We're looking at seminal U.S. documents that are critical to the founding of our country. Those documents, and when you study various time periods of American history, you do have to study some conflicts that occur between people. So I want to make it very clear that critical race theory is not present in our content as it stands. However, our teachers do have to go through some of those sensitive eras of American history to create a more complete, thorough, I guess, overview of what our country has experienced so far to lead us up to this point. So, in conclusion, again, I don't believe it's present in our classrooms, but I want to present you this information to give you what I found in my search.
And I would just add a couple of things to that. Some of you probably saw some of the information that Mr. Edwards provided to the board and so on. So you can read that. I'm not going to go into detail on that. It expands some of the things, some of the definitions and all, and I guess some of the concerns about the whole critical race theory in this country. And apparently, I mean, sometimes I think we lose perspective. We sit here and we can very confidently say that it's not in Wyoming state standards. We don't push it. Nobody's pushing us to teach it. I didn't follow all his links because I didn't really have time, but apparently he's got some links from some of the school districts way far away from us that we probably don't have a lot of perspective about, that have claims that they are pushing it in some school districts. So I mean, I'm sure that's why it's probably a national topic right now. And it's got, you know, the attention it's got. The other point I would say is that, you know, while we have standards, and this would include all probably topics in many classes, while we have standards and we have curriculum apps and we have texts that we use and books that are read in English classes and so on to go through certain eras of time, that's coming at it from the standpoint of formally or a formal plan of what our curriculum holds. That does not mean that we have complete control over every comment that's made by a student or a question, or sometimes discussions that go into areas that maybe some or all of us might not be considered appropriate. And, you know, there's been more than this topic that's come up in at least the 8 years I've been here. I can think of several examples where we've had to address some things with staff and with teachers and give a little guidance on, you know, what we feel is appropriate or not, you know, in more than one subject or topic. So, you know, I mean, while I have every confidence in saying it's not in our curriculum, it's not in our map, and it's not in the state standards, nobody's pushing it in Wyoming for us to include it. That's not to say that inappropriate topics and conversations might not occur, which then we have to deal with. So you know, as far as the board considering, you know, a resolution or ban, I mean, I'm not, I don't think, I mean, that's up to the board, you know, to decide what they want to, how, if they want to take a stand or not on this. One thing I happen to think about too in the wording, and, you know, I talked with James and he just said that probably rather than try to come up with wording right away at this meeting, maybe put it on the October agenda to give everybody time to look at wording and see what everybody's comfortable with. So I mean, that's just a conversation I had with.
That was my suggestion, because if you do anything, it's not like a burning urgent thing.
One thing I would say is if we do something, you know, like this, which I'm certainly not in favor of critical race theory, the more I read about it, the more I'm not in favor of it. To be honest, I hadn't heard a lot about it till recently either, like probably most people. But you know, and again, this gets in the wording, and we can talk about that when the time comes, I guess. But you know, I taught junior high kids for some years, and it's like students to bring up, you know, well, what is this or what is that, or ask something about anything. So I would say, you know, some wording might be a little more wise to use the word promote. You know, we are not going to promote critical race theory in our classrooms. Otherwise, if you just ban any reference to it, then if a kid asks a question, I guess you could say it in that scenario, well, we can't talk about that, go and ask your parents, which maybe that's where you want to go with it. But just some thoughts as we were just talking about it, you know. So, but anyway, I mean, we'll be glad to try to answer questions. And some of you probably read some things that we haven't read. So I mean, it's just kind of a time, I guess.
Probably a good time for discussion. Anybody on the board have any comments or things they want to?
You know, this is my own personal opinion, but I applaud the history of the teachers that are teaching history as it happened. Not changing it, not whitewashing it, not building it down as it happened. Like you had mentioned, there's some very sensitive topics and very sensitive things that happen between the different races over the years. Those need to be taught. We don't need to forget about those because history is meant to teach us a lesson. Personally, I do not believe in critical race. I do not think it even has a remote necessity to be in any of our educational teaching or books or pamphlets or anything else. Quite frankly, I'm embarrassed that this thing even come up. I'm embarrassed for the whole American people right now that we're even thinking about stuff like this. That's just my personal opinion.
I agree. I think it's something that you don't realize. We live in small town Wyoming where a lot of this doesn't happen, but I have family on, you know, by DC and stuff like this. And this is stuff that is coming into their classrooms, whether they know it or not, the different influences that teachers and stuff have on that and how this has become such a broader topic that surprises me where it's actually popped up. I think it's something important to address just so you don't have a situation where you have to deal with it the other way around and go the back way instead of do it just right and have something set out on what we think, and that's it.
I think what motivated me to bring up this subject was in the National School Board Journal. I believe it was in December issue of last year, where they were encouraging local school boards to start teaching to fight systemic racism. Okay, you know, so that kind of got me on the search to find out what systemic racism is. And systemic racism is part of the lens that critical race theory pushes. In other words, everywhere is systemic racism. And then I got even into analyzing what critical race theory is. And the word critical, and I got this from some authors that wrote a book on clinical theories, but it says in social sciences, the word critical is geared toward identifying and exposing problems in order to facilitate revolutionary political change. In other words, it implies revolution. It is not interested in reform. Hence, we do not reform the police. We defund the police or abolish them. It is more interesting in problematizing, that is, finding ways in which the system is imperfect and making noise about them, reasonably or not, than it is in any identifiable activity, especially building something constructive. And then I also got into theory. Okay, theory, when capitalized, is the central object. In other words, the canon, the source of further revelation of canon. Now, when I say canon, canon is the measuring stick. So, for example, in religion, when you talk about the canon, that's what do you measure everything against? So the canon of critical social justice is the heart. It's the lens they look at everything. So when they say that systemic racism is here, everything they look at, they're already assuming it's here. It's not a theory like I think. This is the lens they look through and what they measure things by. And obviously it's been around for a while because of what we saw last year with, for example, the defund the police. And everything makes sense when I, start to look at it. And yeah, there's volumes and volumes on critical race theory, but I think Noel came up with a good summary. So anyway, but that's why it's going to creep in ways we don't know. But I agree that the bill that is being proposed, it's still in the draft form, from what I understand is correct. They not only emphasized, not promoting the critical race theory, but on what to promote, which is already in our legislative laws. To I think, what is it, 3 times in K through 6, they're supposed to teach history.
Yes, you're talking about, the particular standards.
Yeah.
There are 1, 2, I believe, yes, there are 3 different bands essentially where they have to hit a certain hit all standards by at least the last grade in that band, if that makes sense. So there's like a K through 2, there's a 3 through 5, and there's a 6 through 8. So that would be essentially what Joe is speaking to.
And then once in the secondary, in the high school.
For the standards are banded together, although then we also have, in addition to that, our chapter 31 rules, which are graduation requirement rules. And so that goes into a little bit more detail about particular classes they have to have. But yes, as long as they meet all those standards.
And then in the bill, they also promote in more detail the standards, if I read that bill correctly.
That I'm honestly not too sure about, but I would take the word for it.
But I agree with Dr. Copeland in the sense that the wording, if we decide to write a policy, needs to be worded properly. Because it's not that we shouldn't talk about it, because it's here. It's kind of like when I was in high school, we had the Vietnam War, we had the women's liberation, we had the civil rights. All of those were going on when I was in school. And we discussed those and, looked at the pros and cons of what everybody was saying. So it's not that we should ignore it, but I'm giving away my age.
I start till you're dating her. You and me, Joe.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, it's kind
realized-
of like what you're saying. I mean, we teach communism. We certainly don't promote it, nor would we want to at all. And so that's why I agree the wording needs to be thoughtful a little bit moving forward on this whole thing.
you know, one of the whole thing, you know, it's funny you mentioned communism, but some of this, it's based on the lens in which you judge if the society is just as equity of outcome. It's all equity. This is the new word these days, equity, as opposed to equality of opportunity. Right? Obviously, each one of our kids in this room has different abilities and it's going to have different paths in life. It doesn't matter what base they are. But our job as an education people working on that is to provide equality of opportunity, not equity of outcome. They're not all going to get an ACT score of 33. Like that's just not going to happen. But so it's just kind of like communism is just on outcomes as opposed to opportunity. You know, I don't know if I share this or not, Jim. You know, one of the things you talked about or mentioned one time was whether we want to be in the practice of banning things. You know, with this email he sent to me, whether we should draft something ahead of time or not. I think it's best to leave it for discussion. But we want to ban stuff. You know, we can't teach this. You can't talk about this. You can't promote that. Versus, you know, how much then you have faith in the administration and the teachers to use some sense on it. But part of it is there's federal stuff that comes out that's going to be pushed. You know, this administration wants to push it. The federal Department of Education, well, actually, that's more interesting.
If you don't mind, I was going to include this and I didn't because I thought I would at least just mention it and I forgot, so I'm glad you made that point. But at least from the perspective of the federal government pushing this, they were at times, Dr. Copeland, maybe you can speak to this if I don't remember this correctly, they were at times encouraging school districts across the country to use critical race theory as a way to earn a grant or earn a few grants at least. This was an optional grant because of the backlash nationwide where individuals are questioning whether or not critical race theory should be included in classrooms. The government has stepped away from that. Or I should say the Department of Education. I don't feel fully confident saying that just the government part of our National Department of Education has since removed that requirement for these particular grants. So districts can pursue these grants and not have to teach critical race theory and still achieve these grants. So
yeah, I think it was last fall, the U.S. Department of Education came out with grants, money available to, and I don't really remember the title, but it was basically promote diversity or teach diversity. It's not something we would have applied, that I would have recommended we apply for. In fact, I probably wouldn't have known about it had it not been for this controversy, to be quite honest, that came out of it that no one described. But one of the things they said, if you're going to apply for the grant, you have to show what you're going to teach to promote diversity or what you're going to use to promote diversity. And they gave as an example critical race theory. And then, of course, that caused a whole backlash of all of it becoming public. And, you know, they backed away from that a little bit. So, I mean, some, you know, you would certainly agree that probably whoever wrote that and put that as an example, some are promoting that or thought it was a good thing, whoever put that in. I just go back to, you know, we like a couple of comments have been said, you know, we live here and we, speaking of lens, we, you know, we look at things through the lens of where we live. And I don't think we would say it's, or at least I wouldn't say it was a problem that we have here in our school district right now. We have people that are promoting critical race theory. So you tend to forget that there are other places, like Karen said, she had some relatives and some of those links in that field that maybe it is a completely different environment, which I would just say it's kind of sad to think there's so much difference of opinion lately. It seems like that we've lost a little bit of commonality, I think, that I used to be used to in my life. But it is where we are, and I did just point out to James in my email, I said, you know, I'm certainly not for at all promoting critical race theory or teaching it even as any kind of fact or anything in our standards or in our classes. But there's a lot, I could make a list of things I'm not for. So, I mean, it's kind of like a dress code. It's a lot easier to kind of say what you think is appropriate or leave some flexibility and judgment than to try to list everything you would not allow, because it just gets to be impossible. However, if, I'm not opposed to, there's some value in taking a stand against things also that we don't want to come into our district or allow into our district. There are some safeguards. I mean, I don't want to forget about the state we have, like the board hiring administrators. The administrators are reacting to anything be inappropriate going on in classrooms. I remember anything about critical race theory, but I mean, things that happen inappropriately that we have to deal with in classrooms. I don't remember my second year. Some of you remember this probably, that some of you were on the board, some of you were not. Topic come up or a film, something about, it was kind of an anti-beef production thing or something. I don't know if some of you remember that, but it came up in a classroom. There was a film shown about all of the bad stuff. Well, we got immediately, obviously, we're going to get calls when stuff like that comes up. We dealt with it. I feel like the principal at the time dealt with it. So, I mean, there are going to be things that come up that we have to deal with. And we do have safeguards and people in place to deal with those. But as I said in the same email with James, there certainly is value in reassuring people that as a group, the board or the administration does not believe in this critical race theory thing that's out there in the news, pushing everything, because I don't think any of us do. So.
We don't teach racism, but we talk about it. Maybe the same thing here. We won't have anything to do with teaching this, but like you guys talk, maybe it's a good thing that the kids know that something like this is out there and to safeguard against it. But I'm for absolutely this board taking a stand on it, whether it's next month or today, just to get that out there.
Well, this is not just teaching about racism that has happened in this country that we
Right,
all can
it's
accept.
mentioned, and
But
that's-
this is basically calling that everything that this society's done is based on a racism, systemic racism, which that's what nobody, but in this area.
Some people obviously believe that.
I probably so.
Same reason to be here.
Well, I would say that it is happening in this district. We had it in a classroom last fall with my son and Karen's son. So it's here and we dealt with it. Principal dealt with the situation and it ended, I guess, satisfactorily in the end. But it was a little sketchy to start out with. But I'm gonna kind of beat this drum, and I beat it constantly. It's critical race theory, whatever. We're in small town rural Wyoming, and we know every parent that we're representing sitting on this board. I mean, you guys are all elected officials, and we're a board that still is very connected locally. All school boards are. That's what they have. It's their little power that they hold. Is that local control, and it's huge in Wyoming. We talk about it constantly. So my suggestion is represent the people that are asking to be represented here and make a statement on it. No, I don't think things need banned at all, because like you said, people are going to talk about it anyway. They have, already in our classrooms. We're not, I don't know what the word is I'm trying to come up with. It's not gonna not happen here in Saratoga, Wyoming, USA. It already has. But the fact that this school board made a statement, we were asked by some of our people that have voted for us, I think would probably be a good thing, because eventually it comes down from the federal and the state level, however it does. And if we still have some control over that, not necessarily banning, but a statement on it, like you said, I think we're better off. So that's kind of the drum I'm beating, not so much on the critical race theory, but more on that we're a local school board that still should have a little local control, actually a lot, but. So
You said a lot better what I said in the email, but that's the value in a resolution.
Agreed, yes.
One thing that critical race theory, you mentioned sensitive topics. I mean, I think one of the obviously most sensitive topics that people can talk about is religion. And do you believe in God or not? We are not to teach that in school. You know, the teachers are not really to teach that God exists. And you're also not to teach that God doesn't exist, because that's also a religious belief. Or that, you know, we don't teach that. We don't promote it. We don't, it's out there. People can have different views on it, but it's not something that we promote one way or the other, I would say.
Or ban, or
Or ban,
would you
or-
consider it a ban?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really, and that's not exactly like this case, but that's something that can come up, and we've had some issues with teachers, you know, going one way or the other on that. That's not really something that's in a regular classroom setting. It's a sensitive topic.
Well, it's just like, you know, and not everybody, I guess, has complete freedom to make these choices, but, you know, for example, there's a reason that Melissa and I have chosen to live our lives and have our careers in rural America. There's a reason for that, and this is kind of highlighting one of them. You know, you want to live where your value system matches, and we want our school's value system to match the values of this district, I would think. I mean, that's what I would say. So, and that's kind of what KC was getting at. You know, we want everybody to be confident that that is our goal, is that our value system as a board, as an admin, as a school, does match the value system of those that we serve, basically, as the first school. So it's not everybody, again, has the freedom to just move where they agree with people. I get that. And that's a blessing if you do, or if you happen to be, you know, where that is taking place.
Real quick, and this is just more of a question of ignorance than anything. But how do we keep it from coming in textbooks? How do we keep it from?
You know, that's going to be probably going forward. That's going to be the thing where we have to kind of watch what's going on. I don't know how, what's our latest US history book? I'm just curious. Is it?
Our most recent US history book, I believe, was published in 2018. It was an extension of a previous set that we had purchased prior to that. That was outdated. I can't remember the name of it now, but it's.
But Noel kind of skimmed through the books that we have right now, and I did too. And there's no reference to critical race theory. There are some race, you know, some history stuff in there, of course.
Yeah.
And but that's going to be a challenge, because, you know, when we adopt anything new going forward, that's something we can certainly look at in light of all
That's a really
this.
good question. And one of the staff members at one of the northern schools talked to me last year about a seminar they went to, that they said it was really good, 90% of it, and then 10% of the seminar was used to promote critical race theory. They were concerned about. So it's not, you know, some outside influence that, you know, it's 90% good, and then there's 10% focus on that.
And I think that's one of the most concerning parts, is someone had mentioned like creep in earlier, and it just starts with that. And then it's something that eventually just gets diluted down and becomes maybe more accepted and becomes more of a culture. And so I agree with everything that's been said, and some type of resolution or taking a stand is really important. And it's not something that's as easily to creep into our curriculum, because we'd have to go back and a new resolution would have to be made, policy or whatever.
The thing that's going to have to be, and it really says about any board resolution, is as people change, as personnel changes over time, there needs to be a mechanism to have that be made aware when we hire people, or when the board hires administrators or whatever. I mean, that's the only thing I would say, and I'm not sure we have a great mechanism to pass down over time board resolutions, but we'll have to think of that too. I mean, as far as that goes.
One thing, if I may point out, in regards to essentially this idea that critical race theory could come into creep into textbooks, I think there are several natural, in my opinion, natural safeguards against that. If society changes and there's more emphasis placed on that, I think that's something maybe a small committee of individuals could prevent. But these textbook companies, they produce almost exclusively for K-12 education what are called survey history books. Survey history books traditionally do not focus on a very particular lens like this, unless the company, I would argue, is built from the ground up to say, we're going to sell critical race theory textbooks. Our textbooks we have give a very broad overview of American history. And some of you might even remember, if not, you're welcome to borrow a copy of one of our textbooks. Some of the history sections in there are incredibly brief, almost to the point that it's a little insulting sometimes to the actual historical event. There's maybe 10 pages on, I don't know, World War I. Just as an extreme example. You've got that in place. I also think because of the fact that this is such a common topic, I think a lot of textbook companies that have previously been established would probably be doing themselves a massive disservice to say, we're going to start approaching this topic that a lot of people are very argumentative in our country right now. We're just going to put it into a textbook and see what happens. That's not foolproof by any means, but the point being, beyond, we have a committee, we have procedures in place for how we are selecting textbooks, how we are selecting content, and also, I think this is something that is very apparent and out there that we can easily make sure that we're kind of guarded against.
I think something too, like as administrators over teachers, we have to be kind of cognizant of. They should be teaching facts, you know, what history was. I mean, you know, whatever subject it might be, it's factual. We're teaching them. We're not trying to push political views or anything on kids. I mean, that's something that they develop through their life, through their family, through their whatever it may be, but it shouldn't come from our teachers. And sometimes I think that happens. And so I think we need to take a step back, and not just about this, but any kind of, you know, a teacher has a political view, they can't push that onto our kids. That's something, it's their opinion, it's the way they feel, but it shouldn't be pushed onto the students.
All right. If we want to do something or make some kind of resolution, you know, I think Dr. Copeland, if you would work on, if anybody else on the board has a strong opinion on helping him that really wants to help work something to bring to the board rather than us try to hash it out, at least a draft, not any final product. Any suggestions different than that?
My suggestion would be not just to say we're not going to promote this, but also go into what we will promote. And it's very hard. I can almost think of even the newsmen, by little voice inflections, you know, they can express in a choice of words, you know, they can steer people whichever way. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, but that's just the way it is. Teachers will teach, even though they're not promoting something, they still can lead, because that's their job, is to lead. But I think, you know, we stood up and we began this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And what was this founded on? You know, what was the United States founded on? In the 1619 project, it says that the revolution was fought to continue slavery. I mean, that's the reason we broke away from England, was to continue slavery. That is not even a fact of history, but that's something that's being taught in the 1619 project, if you've ever heard of that. So I would say, if we do have a policy or whatever resolution, that we would support the individual rights, the democracy, the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom, you know, that we have, and that this country was founded upon, rather than saying. But all of that is up to a teacher too, because the teacher can steer the curriculum any way they desire, and we just need to be aware of that. So that's what I would say. It's not just against something, but for something.
what the state legislature is trying to do.
Yeah, and we're
I also think you risk getting too broad. If anybody feels strongly that they'd like to work on this. Something for-
strongly about it, but I don't think. we're very eloquently.
I don't know, I think we should do it.
Anybody has any ideas are free to email
Okay.
or call or whatever, come by. We can come up with some drafts, examples or something that we board can look at.
So if you have thoughts, send it to him. Or send it home this board, but we'll work on some draft. Okay. Subject B. Near and dear to our location here. Class size, just kind of, we obviously talked about this some last year. We lose a bunch of students here at Saratoga Elementary School since then, so just a continuation of that. Kind of get the ball rolling, I guess. So you want to start there? Or how do you want?
I'll just kind of start it, and then Darren and JD are both here to talk about, since some of the options affect both campuses. But so we kind of thought we had it set, really, because when we went with Chromebooks, we were not going to need a computer lab. So we converted a computer lab in SES to a regular classroom. So we thought, well, that gives us some leeway. And Darren, in figuring his scheduling, design, and so on, recommended, which we did, split the 5th grade this year, thinking, well, we'll keep the 6th grade together. I think at the time we had 27 or 28 6th graders, and we would keep them together with an aide. We hired a full-time aide, I believe, for that reason. Well, then we kept gaining 6th graders, and I think we're up to 32. So we kind of were back at the same problem we had that we thought had been solved. So what Darren decided to do, we talked several times about options even for this year, but by the time we knew there were going to be 31 or 32 in that class, we were in mid-August. So our instinct was not to do anything too drastic at that point, because we really, if we were going to move the class, that's kind of a big solution. We had not had meetings or talked about it with the board, or talked about it. Well, we talked about it, but hadn't made that decision at board level. We hadn't really gotten a lot of input from parents, formal input. So bottom line, what Darren said, that they could reduce the special ed room, where half of what used to be the special ed room is now an overflow class for 6th grade, I guess, bottom line. So it seems like this is continuing to be a problem. I mean, going to be an ongoing problem. Darren, is it next year's kindergarten class that looks to be another big class?
Looks to be about 35 or 40, between 35 and 40 students, which is good.
Yeah. So it's a good thing, but still, it looks like we're going to need, could need 3 sections there if it's approaching 40, which the last big kindergarten class was last year. They're now 1st graders, and I believe there's still 40 in that group last I looked. So right now we have 2 sections of kindergarten, 3 of 1st grade, 2 of 2nd, 2 of 3rd, 2 of 4th, 2 of 5th. And then we basically hired a long-term sub for 6th grade. She's a certified teacher, and she will take some overflow groups to help Stephanie out at times. They're working all of that out, I think, as we speak. Maybe they've already figured out how that's going to look. So that's where we are now, and it appears we're still going to need more space. We have an OT room that I've talked to Darren, or he's talked to me about. We could convert to a classroom, but about maybe 4, was that before you came, 5 years ago? I can't remember what year that was. We put quite a bit of equipment in there for OT. So if we do away with that room, then we're losing the value of that OT equipment that we have in there for some of our special needs students. So we hesitate to take apart that room to make another classroom, bottom line. So in looking at next year, we decided we better start talking and having this discussion now and come up with, go ahead and kind of figure out what some of our options would be, get some input from parents, but start the discussion here tonight and then come up with a way to get some input from some of the 5th and 6th grade parents, I guess. And so you see in there, or I listed under the admin content, several options, and I'll just go quickly through them and then we'll talk about those. Everybody talk about those and basically say what they want to say. One option is just to leave everything as is, and no, there's going to be spatial limitations, which means some classes will get bigger. And as they get bigger, we could purchase and bring in a modular building, for example, to take the overflow. One of the issues with that, just financially, is that would come out of general fund balance. And the pricing that we just kind of estimated last year when we looked at it would be approaching $300,000 to $400,000 really for a setup with 2 classrooms and restrooms in between. We'd have to figure out where we would put it. Is it connected to the building? So there's quite a few things to figure out there, hence why we're beginning this discussion early. But it would be a pretty major expense just right out of general fund balance, as best I'm aware. Option 2, we could move the 6th grade, which we've talked about, to Saratoga Middle High School, where there is room for 6th grade. And we could have 2 6th grade classrooms housed in SMHS that would still be self-contained classrooms. In other words, they would have one basic core subject teacher in each of those classrooms. So for example, we could just move Stephanie up there as one of those teachers, and she would still have her class. That's what self-contained means. They could go out for some things, but if they go out, for example, like PE or music or art is another one they could go outside for, those teachers would have to be K-12 certified, not just secondary, because the definition of self-contained means they have to be certified to teach the elementary level. Now, right now, those 3 teachers happen to be K-12 certified. So we're very fortunate. Logan is K-12 certified, Noel is K-12 certified, and Mr. Paulson, I believe, is K-12 certified for music. So that would still be an option that we could move the kids in and out for those kind of pull-out programs, so like we do at elementary. The other option, and that would also mean hiring an additional 6th grade teacher. So that would add 1 person of an elementary certified teacher. The other option is to move 6th grade to SMHS, but departmentalize it. In other words, make it a true middle school, like in some larger areas have done, where they go to 7 different teachers. To be able to do that, we would probably also require at least 1 additional teacher in one of the core subject areas. Right now we have 2 English, 1.5 history, 1.5 math, and 2 science. So we would have to figure out some additional help for history and or math to do that. Then they have to be certified in their subject area, just like they are now up there at Saratoga Middle High School. And that's really the difference in definition of self-contained or departmentalized. Number 4, I put on there one option is like they tell Cheyenne to do. I've talked to some people in Cheyenne and they get a little upset that the state doesn't really care too much about neighborhood schools and attendance zones. So if Cheyenne has one school where everybody wants to go and live, and yet they have another school across town that's got several empty classrooms, they say, fine, just balance them. So, I mean, that's an option, probably not a popular one, probably not one we would do. I'm just putting on there all the options I could think of as far as the issue goes. And then, you may think of options we haven't thought of. Darren, I don't know if you want to make comments. That's just kind of the introduction into this whole discussion. We would, I think, want to get some formal parent input on whatever ideas that we kind of come up with as we work our way along, trying to come up with a plan for next fall. Bottom line.
So we've thought about it quite a little bit. I did ask Stephanie along. I don't know if everyone knows Stephanie. She's our 6th grade teacher. I asked her to come so that she could share any thoughts that she might have. Obviously, the popular answer for my school and my staff is that we want to keep 6th grade here. But I don't know if that's really an option looking forward in the future with having 3 potential 3 2nd grade sections next year, maybe 3 kindergarten sections if our numbers are up. That's really not an option here unless we were to bring portable buildings in. I've taught in a modular building. I've been a principal that have modular buildings outside. Financially, that doesn't make a ton of sense if we have space up the hill. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm not, as much as I would love to say we're going to keep 6th grade here, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to do that. I know Stephanie, it'd be tough for me to ship her up there and forget about the 6th grade up there. It does make a little bit of sense to keep 6th grade self-contained up there because you don't have to hire quite the number of teachers that you would have to hire if you made it a traditional middle school. So I think those are all things to consider. But just we're out of space here, and we need to do something in regards to that. I don't know if Stephanie has any thoughts or anything.
Would you go up the hill?
I don't know.
Can we make you?
You made me go to 6.
And I appreciate it. And my daughter appreciates it.
And I think just like what Dr. Copeland said, like Stephanie's an elementary teacher, if you make it a middle school, she can't teach it at a middle school. She can teach it that we're self-contained up there versus if you turn it into a middle school.
How do you deal with disciplinary problems like that?
I think JD's board, I think he has a little bit.
So that wouldn't be a problem though. You wouldn't have to run up there and put somebody in timeout or something.
And just some other numbers. So like right now, the high school has 127 students. I think the building is built for 250, 230. So we do have the space, but if we did the self-contained, it would be down that hall where the ag classrooms are. And there's a bathroom down there. We could bring in lockers and just kind of set them down there. That's where our open computer lab is and our special ed room is down there where we could move that room if we needed to. So there's room down there and it'd be a nice little wing for them. So I was doing some other numbers. So next year numbers, if we just kept where it was, if we were a 712 building, we'd only have 147 kids up there. Because we have a very small senior class, but we add 30-some kids. So we're adding 20 kids basically more next year. So we'd be about 150 kids. 712. If we brought the 6th grade up, with looking at the 5th grade numbers with the 6th grade coming, would be about 180. So even without bringing lockers in and stuff, we would have the room, but I still think if we did the self-contained, kind of put them in their wing, brought them lockers, it still leaves us plenty of space for 712. So.
I think it would be really nice just dealing with like booster club and stuff like that. Those 6th graders kind of are left out of that middle school experience type of thing. I like where they're self-contained, but they're actually up there part of things more. It's kind of a difference having them down here, which is, as a parent, I've already had a kid go up there. So if it was my first kid going up there, that'd probably make me more nervous because you're terrified of your kids up there with seniors, but they really are really good kids up there and I wouldn't be concerned at all.
I'm just gonna throw another kink in, always like the other side of stuff, because I had to deal with the 7th grader this past week. And the whole idea of no recesses, things like that, what would those are things to think about for a sixth grader. Do they become like a junior high, self-contained, where, you know, they're gonna have class all day, or are they gonna still get a recess? My one seventh grader is like, this is crap, we don't get 3 recesses, and, I mean, they're used to that kind of stuff, so it is another step of maturity that you gotta think of about a sixth grader being up there. All the different things are not, just throw another kink into the mix.
They could still have.
But I didn't
recess.
realize that until the seventh grader kind of brought this up, and, you know, they're seventh graders for this first 3-4 weeks. It's a big eye opener for them. It's a whole different type of school. And what will sixth grade look like?
If they could have recess, could they
I
not?
mean, we could make it work. There's a basketball court out there, but, you know, that's about it, you know, a field, front yard, I guess.
So when I went to school here, we actually just had a contained middle school. That was the community center. And we didn't have playground equipment, but we did have like time we sat outside and played basketball or talked, or I don't know what the heck we did probably, but that's probably something feasible for them to do, is play basketball or talk about each other or something, as middle school kids do.
And Mike, do you remember when we had combined grades, and was it when Guy was a sixth grader that they rotated classes for a few? Which I know it's different, but in that we still kind of did that a little bit. How did that work? I mean, I'm assuming they still did recess and whatever, but they rotated just to like PE, art, music, or? Did they
We
do
had
everything?
1 year where we did it with all the core subject areas, they went to that, but where we're a middle school, the content area teachers could teach in their content area K-12, even if they're not certified. We did it 2 ways. We had it where they rotated through the core subject areas, and then we had it where they did not. They just went to specials. We have it right now so that they have, instead of the 3 recesses during the day, our sixth grade only get 2. They don't go to the big long lunch recess, and the afternoon recess is kind of on their own with their teachers. So, you know, you have different various ways to do it. When I taught in Evanston, it was a 6, 7, 8 middle school. So sixth graders were up there. They had no recesses. It's just about expectations that you have to manage it. And give them some
Most,
stuff like that, so.
And I taught in middle school too, way back when, but the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they had a full PE period, which was 50 minutes, just like the 7th and 8th grade. So it's not like they're not getting activity.
And
It's
that's
just
what our sixth
structured
grade
a little
does now.
different.
It has the full PE period. And so they don't get the one long recess like the K-5 does, where they go out after lunch for 30 straight minutes. So
I think no matter what we decide, the children have, they have to make an adaptation to the change. I mean, whether, because my grandson, who's my oldest grandson, had a difficult time first semester last year in high school. I mean, he struggled, he just didn't have it. But this year, he's doing just fine. But there was that transition from 8th grade to 9th, and it was just, you know, he just had a difficult time. But I think all kids are going to have that. Some will take it easier than others, but no matter what we decide, there's going to be that transition. It's like JD was just saying, he had a 7th grader that was complaining about lack of recess. So, you know, it's just a matter of when they're going to make this transition.
I got, you know, all my high school kids want to be buddies because they get a recess every other week. They get about 30 minutes with their elementary buddy.
Yeah.
I think it's important for hiring purposes to know, you know, in January, February, what our plan is and what we're going to do. I think, you know, asking parents,
get some parent information back. So I guess at least going forward that far would be.
Yeah, and one thing, as you mentioned, that to be honest, it might like to have the modulars here, but it makes almost no sense. Why put 3 or 4? That's just irresponsible to put that much money out when we have the building facilities and staff available. And it's not like they're going to downtown Denver to high school.
Well, and they're already having to go up there for sports.
For sports, and they already feel, as my kids started in 6th grade, a little bit left out, being out here and then doing sports, and where do you come dressed? They got no place to put their stuff, football down here, and they got.
Yeah, I just feel like for the teams and stuff, they're kind of, I mean, even if we kept them separate, then they still feel probably more part of it, I guess.
I think so.
I don't know. So I guess my question, I mean, I know you said that right now, those specialized subjects we're good on, but how hard is that, or how common is that to have those K-12 certifications?
Well, there's some subjects that it's a little more common than others. It's more common with PE, art, and music than it is with really anything else, I think. Core subjects and we'd have to probably check a little of this out, because sometimes the middle grades are a little different. I don't know how they are in Wyoming really right now, because it
A
hasn't.
lot
really
of the cores are 6-12 at the secondary level. Some of them aren't. This depends on what you're certified in. Some of them are 6-12, some of them are not. So it just really depends on what the certification is, and what subject you're in.
Well, in some teachers that have gotten their certifications, years ago, or they've got grade levels that they don't certify the same grade band that they used to. So like we have some teachers, I think, that are K-8. We have a few that are like that. I don't know that you can get that anymore in Wyoming, but we have some, and as long as they're here, they can teach K-8, I guess. But just like Mike was talking about, I think it's Jordan that teaches some junior high science. And
He has a
departmentalized
science endorsement from another state, Wyoming honored that.
Yeah.
You could.
So there's some unique kind of little things we just have to do a little checking further if we were gonna departmentalize. That's when that would come in. And then if we were gonna self-contain, as long as the same people kind of stay that we have, then we'd kind of be covered in those pullout things right now. So.
But those are more common to have K-12 anyway, so it might not be as.
I do think it's important not to put new teachers up there, those self-contained, unless you had somebody really good like Mrs. Long up there. With a new teacher, you'd be okay, but I wouldn't trust that with a lot of people. But Mrs. Long is very good. Trying.
And like when I was at Bags, we did the same thing. They kind of like the 5th grade or 6th grade was like at the elementary, but then you went to the different science and math.
There's some even elementary schools, and I'm not sure exactly how you do all of that, but departmentalized to an extent in bigger places. So like there's one that specializes in reading, and they may teach 2 grades of reading, levels of reading. I'm not sure what the certification has to be to do that, to be honest. But, so
looking forward, as far as getting input from parents or community, what do you guys think that would look like? I mean, how would you go about that?
I think,
I would have a meeting. I'm
yeah,
not sure I
probably
would do
with
a
a couple
survey.
of I mean, we could do a survey, but I do think a face-to-face meeting would be in addition to that if we were going to do a survey. And just maybe Darren and I meet with, and JD meet with, what, 5th and 6th grade parents, just to kind of talk. I mean, I don't know what grade levels, really, we're talking 5th grade, but yet this year 6th grade parents might be a good. But I'm not sure how broad we'd want, maybe 4th. I don't
Maybe
know.
4th and 5th grade, I think.
Maybe 4th and 5th. That's it.
And to be realistic, I mean, you're really discussing whether to put, at the end of the day, self-contained versus compartmentalized.
Probably
there.
Probably.
To be realistic. I mean,
It's
have it
gonna
down
be a
here.
hard
It's
pill
front
for
of
some
half.
parents to swallow.
And especially, if we include 4th and 5th grade parents,
We're not looking ahead. to
Fourth
high
grade
school.
parents are looking at their fourth graders.
Yeah.
So it'll be, but Derek, Mr. Jennings and I can come up with a strategy to meet and figure out the best way to get some input. I think.
You think maybe, rather than just focus on the parents of those classes, because I'm just thinking of conversations that I hear. Is, I don't want my first grader to, they're thinking in the broader picture rather than just what's affecting their kid. They're looking at, I remember in Hanover, Hannah did not want the elementary school, the high school, period, end of discussion. But then, that was a totally different thing, but we had to take in the whole community rather than just certain parents.
I think, I brought it up to our PTO, I invited them to come today to our discussion, our meeting. So I think, just getting the word out there, but I would agree, maybe it's more of a whole elementary discussion versus just a couple of grades. So I think, whether it's a letter from me with, an opportunity to provide some feedback, again, talking to our PTO, I had quite a few parents at that meeting and they didn't raise any huge concerns, but just getting the word out there, I agree.
I think the other thing that would be important is to maybe bring some middle school parents in that whose kids are up there. Because I can tell you that my kids say they never even see each other during the day. And Rowdy's a junior, but even when he was a freshman and Rye went up there, I guess that was last year when he was a sophomore and Rye went up there, they never see each other except when they drive, when they drive in and drive out. So it's important because I have a really good friend in Musk that had me come talk to a group of parents. They had a huge issue there trying to move their middle school up to their high school, and I don't think they got it done. But I mean, those parents were mad, and they did not want their little kids going up there. I mean, it was the same setup. They were playing sports and everything, but they did not want them at the high school. And it was really important for them to hear from the, even the freshman parents, how they thought that school was for their younger kids. But I don't think they got it done. I mean, we're not in the option, we are here, but it would be important to hear from some parents of older kids too, I think. The culture and the environment of that school.
Yeah, I would have thrown a fit with my first kid sending them up there because they just seem so little to you, and seniors and all of them seem so big, and then you think what you learned in high school and stuff like that, not in school. You don't want your kids exposed to that, but really it is such a different dynamic than I thought it ever would be. Having multiple kids go up there and stuff like that, you really realize that they are safe. Like, if you tell me they're safe, I don't really believe you, no offense. I mean, I believe my kids telling me, or, you can get all the reassurances that your kid's gonna be in a situation, but to hear it from people that have experienced, that makes it more comforting, I think.
See, and it's crazy to me because obviously ours is K-12 and our big kids are so great with the little kids and they love it, and they just get to interact, and it's an easy transition for them to go on because they already know all the teachers, so it's to me, it's like, it's a no-brainer that they're already playing sports. Put them up there where they're gonna feel like they're more comfortable, they're gonna know their environment better, they're gonna know,
That's how I felt like going to bags in the one building thing. Like, we don't even understand why that would be a concern. It's because it's so integrated. The big kids, the little kids, it's a big deal to see the big kids in the hallway. And if they know your name, oh my goodness, oh wow.
Well, just like Mike said, they have the buddy system, and I mean, those big kids, like, they take care of those little kids, and they help them do stuff that it's just, but different.
It's just always been that way.
Yep.
So that's what makes it. Yeah.
So it's not as scary as you think it is.
Well, no, but it's not scary to me now, but there's a lot more kids at Saratoga. It's not as close, I want to say, knit. I mean, you have so many different groups. It's a different dynamic than encampment. It's completely different. When you have that many kids, I totally understand that and see that. And having older kids now, I wouldn't hesitate to send them up there Cause I think we have wonderful kids and it's not as scary as I thought, but my first kid, I would have been scared.
You think your kids with David are in school, so that's scary. Much scary.
They can pretty much watch themselves now.
Well, Mr. Gendricks and I will figure, and JD, maybe that's not a bad thought to get some, whenever we have a meeting, maybe have some of SMHS parents there just to talk about their experiences with their kids. Yeah,
Don't
there-
point at me, I really don't.
She already has a thing ready.
She's got more kids.
Presentation. You could bring
Yeah,
a lunch
literally, yeah.
presentation.
Well, it's probably good if it's a non-board.
Yeah, too, yeah. I could suggest a few parents.
So we'll
Thank you,
work
guys. I
on.
know, kind of the reason that we started this discussion was sixth grade, so just want to thank Stephanie. I went to her last week and said she was gonna get her 32nd student. And she has a great co-teacher there, Brianna Williams, but she definitely does an excellent job. There's not many teachers like 32 kids in the learn with. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
She's
So good job.
phenomenal.
Okay. That was all we agenda. I'm gonna adjourn this work session and Bill's committees at 3:30, however you are on it. If you're here, you want to go to it, you're always welcome to go. It's not a limited function. And the regular meeting will start at